All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for spending time with us this afternoon for this incredibly important conversation about dangerous legislation that has been filed in this legislative session. My name is Joe Saunders. I'm a former state representative from Orlando and the current senior political director for Equality Florida. We're proud to be standing with the Human Rights Campaign today to talk about the serious dangers of Florida House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1748. We're joined by advocates for equality from all over the state of Florida. We've got national leaders here to talk about what's happened in other states that have moved forward with dangerous legislation that repeals LGBT rights ordinances. And we've got members of the LGBT legislative delegation here to talk with you as well. To get us started, it is my privilege to introduce you to a leader in equality in Florida for over 20 years, the Executive Director of Equality Florida, Nadine Smith.
Thank you. First and foremost, we are here to sound the alarm. HB 3 is a broadly written and very dangerous bill. And it matters less what the intentions of the crafters of this bill are. What matters is the impact of this legislation. Florida gets to benefit from hindsight in ways other states did not. We cannot ignore what has happened over the past few years in North Carolina, when legislation that began as innocuously as this bill has begun, already passing through one committee with people barely paying attention to the wide, sweeping implications. North Carolina might not have known that it would cause them hundreds of millions of dollars in economic impact. They might not have known it would cost them conventions and conferences. They might not have known that it would damage their reputation even to this day. But Florida knows what HB 3 will do. Where the Florida legislature has failed to pass statewide non-discrimination protections at the local level, cities and counties, whether in conservative or progressive areas of the state, have led the way. And as a consequence, 60% of our state, 60% of the third largest state in the country, have protections that include sexual orientation and gender identity. That's roughly 13 million people that HB 3 now threatens to take those protections away. It is not enough. It is not enough to say it is not what you intended to do. What we know is what the effect will be. So we are here to sound the alarm, to say to the legislature, to all fair-minded people, this bill cannot be permitted to move forward. It cannot be permitted to pass, and no one can pretend they did not know the damage that this bill can do to our state, the harm it would inflict on the people who live here, the tourists who come to visit here, the businesses that want to draw talent here and keep talent here, and the lasting damage to our reputation. We say vote no on HB 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadine. HB 3 is a dangerous piece of legislation. It is a broad preemption bill that would repeal protections across the board, environmental protections, protections for workers, protections for animal rights, child and safety, health and safety standards across our state, and would have a devastating impact on LGBT rights and local human rights ordinances in the state of Florida. To talk about what we should be doing in Florida and where we should be going, it is my pleasure to bring to our podium the first LGBT woman elected to the Florida legislature and the lead sponsor of the Florida Competitive Workforce Act, Representative Jennifer Webb.
I'm Jennifer Webb, and I am the proud sponsor of, thank you, Joe, HB 485, the Florida Competitive Workforce Act. This legislation simply updates the 1992 Florida Civil Rights Act to provide protections for LGBT Floridians in employment, housing, and access to public spaces. It's an honor to sponsor this legislation as Florida's first openly gay woman to serve in the Florida legislature. And over the past decade, support for the Competitive Workforce Act has skyrocketed. CWA has secured the highest number of co-sponsors in the House this session. Awesome. This bill has already garnered nearly 50 co-sponsors from both the Republican and the Democratic Party, and we're only into the first week of session or second week of session. That's astounding. Because the truth is that the more our leaders get to know their LGBT community and the families that are impacted, the more sympathetic they are, the more they want to extend rights to all Floridians, to protect all Floridians. 68% of Florida voters support the legislation, and we know that that number has only continued to grow. I'm so proud to represent the LGBT community in the Florida House, and passing this bill is a priority for me. What I know is that passing this bill is already a top priority for my constituents who are not LGBT themselves, but want to protect their loved ones, co-workers, neighbors, and their local businesses. I'm so grateful to have the support of so many of my colleagues, including Representative Toledo, who is not able to be here today, but also is my prime co-sponsor, a Republican, and who knows that what's good for our community is also good for business. Thank you so much.
All right, next we get to bring to the podium a national leader in the movement for equality, someone who has seen firsthand and from the front lines the devastating economic impact of anti-LGBT legislation in states that have filed and passed bills that repeal local LGBT protections. The backlash has been immense. Please welcome National Field Director for the Human Rights Campaign, Marty Rouse.
Thank you, Joe. It's my honor to be here today. I am the National Field Director of the Human Rights Campaign. I am based in Washington, D.C., and I live in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. My parents live in Florida. They live in Delray Beach. And they're wondering why I, flying to Florida last night, am not flying to visit them in Delray and to get some sun. And the reason why I'm not going to Delray Beach to get some sun is because there's clouds brewing here in Tallahassee. There is an effort. We don't know what the motives are, as Nadine said, but there is an effort here in Florida to pass legislation, HB 3, that would take away protections for LGBTQ community people and visitors to this state. And as you all know, several states have done this in the past and tried in the past, especially North Carolina. And we do not want to see Florida become the North Carolina of 2019. When North Carolina passed HB 2 in 2016, that state, in addition to becoming a shame across the country, that state lost $660 million in revenue because of that discrimination that was passed. Conferences were not held. Conferences were canceled. Musicians said, I am not coming to that state because it discriminates. People fled. Businesses said, we are not going to come to North Carolina. Businesses said, we are going to stop growing in North Carolina. We do not want that to happen here in Florida. The state of Texas in 2017 considered similar legislation. In fact, after North Carolina enacted HB 2, the Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor of Texas said, come on to Texas, we can't wait to pass HB 2 in Texas. And as that legislature only debated the bill that was eventually killed, just in the several weeks of debate in Texas over similar legislation that would have taken away benefits and protections in Texas, just in that several weeks of debate, over $66 million of conferences were canceled just because of the threat. And so I am here today to implore the legislators, who are most of them like-minded and want to do the best for their citizens. They don't understand what could happen if HB 3 becomes law in the Sunshine State. So please look carefully. Please listen intently to your constituents who are here. And please do the right thing. There are only 3 states in our nation that have legislation similar to what you are considering here in Tallahassee. Does Florida want to join the likes of Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina? No. There have been conferences, like I told you, and sports conferences and tournaments that left North Carolina. In fact, as you may remember, the NBA All-Star Game left Charlotte, North Carolina in 2016 after it passed HB 2. And do you remember where that All-Star Game went when it left Charlotte, where it went? It went to Orlando, where there are currently full protections for the LGBT community in that city. But you know what? What might happen if HB 3 passes and becomes law in Tallahassee? We don't know. We don't know. But we do currently know there's another sports tournament, a world tournament that is watching Florida. It's the World Cup. And FIFA has a non-discrimination policy. And currently, 17 U.S. cities are competing to be one of the 10 cities that host the Men's World Cup Games in 2026. And I can tell you, the cities of Orlando and Miami, 2 of the 17 U.S. cities that are competing, we don't know what will happen to those bids in Miami and Orlando if HB 3 passes. So I encourage the legislature, do the right thing. Listen to your constituents who have come here to Tallahassee. Read the bill. Think hard and think smart. And keep Florida moving forward. It's time not to pass discrimination. It's time to pass legislation supported by Representative Webb and others. It's time for the Florida Competitive Workforce Act. It's time Tomorrow, the United States Congress is going to be entering the Equality Act and considering passing it at the federal level. You here in Tallahassee can pass protection at the state level. It's time to move forward and protect people. It's not time to roll back protections. Thank you very much.
So, Marty was correct, and Representative Webb are correct, that the Florida Competitive Workforce Act, which would bring statewide LGBT protections to the state of Florida, making us more competitive, making us more inclusive, is the most sponsored piece of legislation currently in the Florida legislature. 61 members of the Florida legislature have co-sponsored the Florida Competitive Workforce Act. One of those co-sponsors is here with us today, somebody who represents both Miami-Dade and Broward County, home to some of the most local ordinances protecting the LGBTQ community. Please welcome my friend, Representative Chevron Jones.
Well, first of all, good morning to everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here today. I knew there was a reason why it was bright inside the Capitol today, because of all of you who are here in the Capitol. And Marty, I think you forgot about one large event that's coming to Florida next year, and that's the Super Bowl. And so when we speak about these protections, I don't think Florida is crazy, but they're not that crazy. Because I know Florida, we speak well about how much we love our businesses and our business communities. But I want to make sure that we are clear on one thing, that when we come to Tallahassee, so often we get a lot of these bills that violates home rule. And I know for a fact that ever since I've been here in Tallahassee, it's a shame that our local governments have to come here to fight to ensure that we maintain our home rule and come to Tallahassee to tell the legislators that it is not our job to tell them what to do. And to understand the HB 3 and how it broadly repeals a whole host of local ordinances and dramatically restricts the ability of local governments to govern effectively. Local democracy works best when local governments are equipped to lead, not held back from passing policies with their constituents' best interests in mind. In addition to endangering local human rights ordinances, bans on so-called conversion therapy and equal benefits ordinances, HB 3 would repeal a host of local protections, including environmental laws focused on clean water, air, local animal welfare ordinances, health and safety regulations, and work protections. HB 3 prevents local governments from making decisions about what types of policies are best for those who live and work in local communities. In my hometown, Miami-Dade and Broward County, We lead the state in local laws that protect the LGBTQ community from discrimination. Florida House Bill 3 is bad for business, and it sets our communities up to fail. Repealing protections from discrimination laws that protect young people from the debunked practice of conversion therapy and policies that help us to take care of our families is wrong. Let local governments do their job, and this bill should not go through. And I'll end with this, that when we look at the amount of people who stand with myself, Representative Webb, Representative Carlos Guillermo-Smith, and other allies within the legislature, I want to make sure that we continue to put my Republican colleagues on notice that if you continue to put forth these measures that eat away at the protections of people, you think that you hold the power now. But I want you to really pay attention to the last elections. The people are coming for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Jones. To close us out, we're going to bring up to the stage someone familiar to all of us here, an anchor of advocacy for equality in the Florida legislature, Representative Carlos Guillermo-Smith.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to all of my colleagues, and thank you to all of the advocates who are here to stand for fairness and equality for all Floridians. Can I get a hell yeah? When we talk about fairness and equality for all, we mean fairness and equality for all, including LGBTQ Floridians. We can no longer continue to stand against hatred and bigotry and say that we don't tolerate discrimination, we don't tolerate bigotry until we say no to all forms of bigotry, to homophobia, to transphobia, to anti-Semitism, to Islamophobia. The reality is that legislative leaders are picking and choosing what types of bigotry they care about and what types of bigotry they do not care about. We do not accept that. We do not accept that. If House Bill 3 passes, LGBTQ Floridians in 60% of part of the state, 60% of the state currently has protections from discrimination if you're LGBTQ. If they wake up and House Bill 3 becomes the law, those LGBTQ Floridians will realize that they no longer have any rights against discrimination. That is wrong. The reality is that we continue to hear legislative leaders and the governor openly opine, what can we do to recruit businesses to the state of Florida? Well, let me guess. Well, we can start by treating all Floridians fairly and equally under the law. They say, oh my God, Amazon is leaving New York. We have to ask them to come to Florida. Have they looked at what Amazon's list of requirements are for where they want to relocate? Amazon wants to relocate to places that treat LGBTQ people with dignity and respect. We're not necessarily going to throw billions of dollars at tax incentives at these businesses, but we can throw fairness and equality for all at them, and they will come running to Florida. Look, the reality is that Arizona saw this, Indiana saw this, Texas saw this, Georgia saw this, North Carolina saw this. We do not want Florida to see the same economic backlash that came from promoting anti-LGBTQ hatred if House Bill 3 passes. We need to kill the bill, and we need to send a loud and clear message that to all of those businesses who left all of those states for their hatred and bigotry towards LGBTQ people, we can welcome all of them with open arms by passing the Florida Competitive Workforce Act. And we don't have to spend a dime of taxpayer money to do it. Thank you all for coming.
So, House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 1748 are extremely dangerous pieces of legislation. It is because of that danger that people from all across Florida, people from the Panhandle all the way down to Key West, and all across the I-4 corridor have taken a day off work, have put their kids in daycare, have made a long drive here to our state capitol to stand here today and to denounce this bill and to call on the Florida legislature, don't repeal equality, don't repeal protections. We do want to take a chance to take an opportunity first to recognize elected officials that have joined us. Representative Anna Escamani is here. Representative Adam Hattersley from Tampa is here as well. And Julie Fishman and Tim Varnigan are here as well. Yes. And we're happy to open it up for questions from the press if you have any. Okay. We'll be available offline as well for one-on-ones. Thank you all so much for coming. And thank you all to the advocates who came from all over the state. Thank you.